Good morning, everyone. This is the Stockbridge Bowl Stewardship Committee meeting, and thank you for coming. And I'm sorry if the agenda and everything came, weird. And I know Roxanne had wanted to amend it, but I didn't have time. But I had left one item, so I thought if anything additional wanted to be brought up, it could sort of fit under new topics. I hope
Right.
that's not too loosey-goosey, but so I wanted to first say I wanted to thank Dr. Cortman and Chris Main and Ben for doing the presentation. I thought it was really thorough, and it was so helpful, and I learned a lot, and I think all of you did too. I also wanted to acknowledge Roxanne. She had gone to the select board meeting to get our committee into the bylaws as a permanent commission. So that's a big deal. Thank you, Roxanne, for the hard work. And Roxanne also started I guess she has the lake management plan and details, and maybe she'll talk more about it at her turn. There's just a few things I wanted to sort of bring up and not discuss yet, but maybe when it's my turn to talk at the conservation was because of COVID, I've noticed, and all of you have noticed, people have been moving into town and buying property, which is a positive thing. But in that, maybe there's some growing pains and some things to consider. We've had the gentleman with the 9 boulders that, and acted, and that went under conservation. And then we have these oversized homes on the edge of the lake, and they want saltwater pools. And how does that affect the lake and the watershed? And we have a property with clear cutting. I think Dr. Kenny had talked about that. And these are just sort of like, they don't quite fit into one department. Like they don't all go in conservation or planning board. It's sort of like how to manage these new things coming that we're faced with, and how to do it diplomatically, how to do it with fairness, and also with the lake in mind. And I guess maybe our committee is a good one because we do get to discuss things and bring in shared knowledge. But that is all I have for right now. Charles, do you want to talk about the minutes? Is that something you want to? I don't know where they're at. Charlie, we can't hear you.
I always speak better when I'm silent, but we distributed the minutes, I think, to everybody, and they were very complicated because of the presentation we had last time. It's highly technical, and so I would hope that everybody had a chance to look those minutes over in detail. And if you haven't had that chance, I would make a motion well, I won't make a motion yet. I'll leave it up to you people, but I do think they were highly technical and they deserve review before we unanimously approve them. And if we can't unanimously approve them, I'd like to have whoever feels it needs to be adjusted do that for us so that we can have that in place before we finally approve them. That's just my thoughts about the minutes.
Michael has a question. Go ahead.
Maybe a suggestion rather than a question. Charlie, first of all, thank you very much. I read it twice. I don't know how
it was Roxanne also, Michael. She did a lot of it.
Roxanne, I thank you, Charlie. Roxanne, thank you both. Should we send this on to Dr. Cortman, the minutes, just for him to check it over to make sure that that he may want to add something, or he may look at it? I mean, he's the ultimate reviewer of those minutes since it was his presentation, just in case there's something, so that, odds are he may or may not find something, but that's just a suggestion.
I like that idea a lot. I think once we all agree upon them ourselves, I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay, we can do that. That's a good idea.
Well, I thought we would do that before we agreed to the minutes, because then we'll have them complete. Then it would just be at the next meeting we would agree to the minutes unless for some reason it has to be done today.
Well, we could have a preliminary approval from
Yeah.
every, just to make sure that everybody, that we know that everybody here had a chance to weigh in on it. Once we have a kind of consensus, then we could send it. I think your idea is a good one. We could send it on to him and he could give it back to us, and then we can make a motion to finally approve them so that we had them officially, we had an official consensus, and we also had his approval. I like your idea a lot, Michael. I think we should first have everybody here agree that we think that it's right, or at least if we have differing opinions about it at all, that we could post those and he could sort it out for us or help us.
Okay, it's a good idea. So do we need a motion to send them to Dr. Cortman, or can we agree within just a verbal agreement?
Well, I make a motion that we all vote to have a preliminary approval of the minutes as they stand. And if anybody has any additions, corrections, or whatever, that they put them forward now, or tell us that they haven't had a chance to review the minutes so we could delay that until they do have a chance. But I think that in general, if everybody approves the minutes or is in a position to make their corrections or additions now, that then we make a preliminary approval. And once that's done, as part of that motion, I also say that we send it on to Dr. Cortman for his take on it.
So Charlie, would you like to reword that motion to say, let's
Yeah.
Yes,
vote to approve them as they are and have Dr. Cortman verify them afterwards?
Thank you for the clarification, John.
Thank you,
I'm glad you speak English.
I was a little concerned there. It was very long.
I'll second that. I think that's a great idea. And I mean, preliminary, they look great to me. I read them twice myself. They are very technical, and they look spot on to me, but I think it's a great idea to send them off to Dr. Cortman for sure.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. All in, so the motion carries. So, Charlie, do you want to send them, or do you want me to send them to him?
Yeah, I'd like you to send them. You're the chair. I don't want to be working.
Okay. And when do we want them back by? Like in a week, 2 weeks? Like, is there a time frame that would be better for the committee?
I don't see so. I think we ought to accommodate Dr. Cortman. He's the one that has to give us a good approval.
Okay. All right. So that's minutes. So reports. Who's here today? John, do you want to go first?
Well, I have a confession to make. I was unable to make the last meeting of the sewer water. So although I've read the minutes, I think Mike can probably speak better to that committee.
I did go for you.
Thank you.
Mike, do you want to help John? And you could do your report and John's report, Mike
Yeah,
B.
as far as the water sewer, the last meeting, I was in my vehicle with my son.
Oh yeah, you were right.
Yeah, he was getting pitching lessons in Pittsfield, and I was out in my truck, and it was a pretty straightforward meeting, kind of more on sewer and water infrastructure improvements we're going to be doing. With a sewer pump station we've been working on for Park Street, as that one's aging. And nothing really, it was just kind of a basic nothing really up around the lake, let's say. And as far as, the sampling and all that, when the ice comes off the lake, we'll be going out to gather data once the ice is gone. And I don't know if Bob wants us to go out into the middle of the lake now, because there's plenty of ice on the lake, the whole entire lake. I don't know if that makes any sense to do that, but we could do that. And I have not been on the lake yet this year ice fishing to see if there's any, that reddish tinted water with a so-called bloom under the ice. And I haven't heard anything from anybody that's been up there fishing that I know. A couple of people I've talked to didn't notice anything. I've never actually witnessed that on that lake in all my time either, but yeah, not a whole lot to report, but that's basically it for me.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
And one thing I found interesting at the water and sewer meeting was the other gentleman, I forgot his name. He's been calling to see if people want to connect to the sewer, the town sewer, and I thought that was great. That, you know, give them the opportunity. And also, didn't you do some bridge updates? I thought.
We are working on a project where the bridge that is closed up in Interlaken now, it's been closed for, boy, 6 or 7 years now, I think. We are getting our utilities off of that bridge because the bridge is moving, and we're really afraid. We don't know how long it's going to take for that bridge to get repaired. So we're moving our utilities on a temporary utility bridge to go over to span the Larrywog Brook, the outlet of the bowl. And we're, you might have caught the special article that I have for water this year at the town meeting will be for engineering to down near the golf course at Tuckerman Bridge, is to get that water main out of the river and get it up on the bridge. And the engineering will be a special article on the town meeting floor this year for water surplus to move that water main out of the river.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Charlie, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'd like to just make a suggestion. You know, we didn't nominate someone to do the minutes this time. And I'm going to suggest that we might each, as we have made our relative presentations, sort of collate that, put them together, send them in, and put them together as the minutes. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So the Board of Health, of course, was very pleased to see that cornerstone put into our lake management plan last meeting by the reports from Doctors Cortman and Burpee, and also from Chris Main about the monitoring program that had been going on last year and those test data. I consider that to be a real finish to the foundation, and that we can build upon now with our lake management program. And I want to say that, you know, of course, the minutes will show that it's a highly technical thing. I'm going to try to just pull out what I think are the important aspects of that. But first of all, I'd like to thank Mike Buffoni and Mark Viola for actually doing a lot of the work that pulled in those test results. I really appreciate that. And really on behalf of the Board of Health, you know, we identified after that bloom that there was a need for monitoring and getting a cyanobacterial specialist, and we formed a cyanobacterial committee. But it was just really an almost intangible idea. We had ideas, but Roxanne McCaffrey, you have to really understand how much work she did to bring that in, put it in place. It was a huge amount of work, a huge amount of effort. And on behalf of the Board of Health, I want to thank Roxanne for that, because it really was a wonderful accomplishment, and it wasn't easily accomplished. So I think we all really owe her a debt of gratitude, but especially the Board of Health. Thank you very much, Roxanne, for that. And so in order to...
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, you're welcome. But just to move forward a little bit here, the ideas are complex, but I think we could pull out a couple of very important points from that last meeting from the Board of Health point of view. And please feel free, anybody, to add your takes on it also. But I was really happy to see that Dr. Cortman thought that the lake was not undergoing progressive eutrophication compared with where it was in the 1980s. I would point out that probably that period of time was just after the worst period of time of nutrient loading that we would have ever seen, because I don't know exactly what the years were. Mike Buffoni probably knows this better than I, but we did have a septic system problem down in the south part of the lake, and that had been remedied, and that nutrient loading was gone. And so that, I think what we had there was a gradually improving situation on the basis of that, combined with whatever else was going on. But still, I think it's really nice to know that we don't have that kind of progressive eutrophication system at this point, even though the lake is a eutrophic and potentially hypertrophic lake by a lot of standards. So it is a vulnerable lake in that regard, even though it hasn't been deteriorating. The second take that I have on this is that we do have a lot of cyanobacteria in the lake, and they did come to the fore and give us a problem a couple of years ago, but Dr. Cortman felt that this was probably a climactic abnormality. You know, that there were a lot of things that converged that particular summer, and that it isn't something that we would necessarily have to expect on a regular basis. And like Mike said, he didn't note the reddish blooms that Cortman presumed could occur. And even though we see that there are large numbers, large colonies of these things down below, as long as they stay down there, we don't have to worry about them, or at least we don't have to do anything about them, and they don't do anything to us. So we can't rest on our laurels completely. We do have to keep in mind the fact that these things are there, and there will probably be more climactic abnormalities. Look at what's going on across the country, even down in Texas. I mean, at the present time, we have these aberrant weather conditions that we never really experienced before. So we do need to move forward with the two ideas that the lake is a eutrophic lake and that we do have a lot of cyanobacteria, and we have to make sure that that those two things don't get worse, and that we can head off whatever happens in the future with respect to weather. And then the last part of this is that we do have other tasks before us that this committee is going to have to face. You know, we've talked about dredging, we've talked about weeds, we've talked about the ecology of the lake and the fact that there are many important creatures and plants in it. And we have to balance all these things together as we go forward, using this foundation that we've started to set up, and go forward with a lake management plan that will be comprehensive and consider all of these things together. So I think we have good things that came out of this. We have warnings that we have to be careful about, and we've set the foundation for moving forward with our lake management plan.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, and we just all of us included in this committee, the amount we've learned about this lake in the last year is just, it's pretty amazing, really. I mean, there's a lot of understanding now, at least on my part as well, going out, and we can notice that stratification and notice if it's climbing, and it's really interesting. And we have all learned quite a bit, and their presentation the last meeting was really great. I don't know. This water stuff intrigues me anyway, but it's pretty exciting stuff.
I think that's a great point, Mike. You know, I think that was part of Roxanne's strategy to have you guys do it. You know, because it really, and Cortman agreed with her on that this is a learning process, and you guys are going to be the point guys, you know, looking at this in the future.
Yeah, it is. It's fun to learn, and I'm glad Roxanne included us, and it's just great to. Any way we can pass savings on to the town, it's always good. You know, it's always good to have some in-house stuff being able to be done, which is beneficial financially and for all of us.
Thank you, Mike. Jim W., do you want to speak?
Sure. Sorry, I was a few minutes late, but I'll echo those sentiments, because I think the town and the stakeholders have come a long way since the day Charlie and I received the DPH call to basically shut down the bowl before the Josh. So one thing that is going to be a conversation we're going to talk about at 11 from the Board of Health, and I won't ask the Board of Health chair to speak because we need to talk about this at 11 o'clock meeting. You know, something has come to our attention from the Board of Health perspective. So we've been getting a series of inquiries from residents over the last month or so, asking about a series of reports that have been reported from the Boston Globe, from EPA, with respect to the mosquito control program, where EPA and DEP has found that the chemicals that the mosquito control program has used has PFAS compounds and other toxic chemicals. And we weren't really notified about that. So there's a lot of concern that the Board of Health and I will be raising at 11 o'clock. So I would encourage people to attend that meeting. It is posted, and I'll send it to Jamie if you're interested. I know Anita sent it. And it's just one of those things where the town's been part of this program for a long time, where they apply a lot of chemicals to the community with respect to trying to control the nuisance program, because the West Nile virus and triple E prevalence in Berkshire County was significantly low. And these were concerns that we raised up several years ago to the mosquito control program, that sure, you're applying chemicals to the environment, but what's the risk reward here? And now the EPA and DEP said that there's toxic chemicals that were found in these same chemicals that they're applying. In Stockbridge, not everyone's on town sewer, not everyone's on municipal water. And there's a lot of questions that we need to speak about and really look ourselves in the mirror on what's the risk reward of a continuous application of chemicals where it's really not warranted. So that's all I have. We're going to have that discussion. It's on the agenda for 11 a.m. And I would encourage people to attend to see if we can get some type of response from the contract mosquito control program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And just an aside, when the man from the mosquito control program spoke, he could not tell us at the meeting where he sprays. Like he couldn't give the amounts, and it cost the town over $30,000. And it's just, so it would be a good to have more information at the next meeting.
Yeah, actually, that's a $30,000 cherry sheet number. So that's actually coming in from the state. But that will be on the town warrant, I suspect. And that's being worked on by the Board of Health in terms of whether or not we continue with this mosquito control. So I look forward to listening to your meeting at 11. I may not be able to do it live, but I will definitely be watching it later today.
Good, thanks. Let's see who else is here. Gary Kleinerman, would you like anything to share? Oh, we can't hear you, Gary. Uh-oh. You okay, Gary? You there?
Yeah, wait a minute. No, do you hear me now?
We can hear you, not see you, but that's okay.
Wait a minute, microphone is your view. I don't know. Anyway, I've been through this before in the 90s, and this report that we just got is mind-boggling. It gives us what we've never really had before. I think, and it gives us a direction to go in. I mean, there's not much we can do, but I'm glad we're able to do some monitoring maybe, and we might be able to predict when it's going to happen again, although I think that's pretty tough. But other than that, I think it's a spectacular report. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Good to see you. Michael Nathan, would you like to share?
I'll just comment on Gary's comment quick. I mean, the prediction I know is going to be tough, but I think everybody kind of learned, and I learned, that if we have a big weather event, and the biggest thing we're looking at is that stratification. And if we see that number coming up, which usually is 10 to 11 meters, and we see that line, that stratification after a big weather event coming, we're probably going to possibly see something if we see that thing coming up. I think the prediction, I mean, I think we have a pretty good knowledge of when to get out there, watching that thermocline. And if we see that thermocline coming up, we're going to probably have some issues in the near future, I would think. I don't know if everybody else agrees with that, but that's the take I get on all this. That thermocline to watch is very, very important. So anyway.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Mike. I think there are other aspects of the monitoring too that are like that. I see, that this is very similar to, as a doctor, you have to write orders when people are in the hospital, you write orders all the time. And one of the orders that doctors always write is for the nurses to take certain things called vital signs. Now, pulse, blood pressure, temperature, things like that. Now, the idea there is when you do those vital signs, you don't always do something about it. You know, it's we could say, well, we're taking vital signs all the time. We can't do anything about it. Well, that's because most of the time you don't want to do anything about it. You don't want to see those vital signs change. But if we didn't understand the significance of the vital signs, and especially if we couldn't put those vital signs changes together in the context of what we know is wrong with the patient already, we wouldn't be able to do what we need to do in order to anticipate and intervene appropriately. So I agree with you, Mike. I think that the knowledge we've gained is going to allow us to move along in a way that we're actually doing vital signs on the lake, and we're acquiring an understanding of it, so that, yes, Gary, you're right, that we're not doing anything particularly about this at this point, but it's going to tell us when we do need to do something. It's going to tell us when we've done something, whether that was a good idea or not. You know, these are the different things that we learn once we've gotten up to a level of understanding that we're getting to. Now, that's the key aspect of this. We're learning the vital signs of the lake now, and we're learning how they should be monitored, and we're going to be able to use them when we do things in the future.
Yeah, we got a good baseline. We've got some good data under our belt and a good understanding of what to watch for.
Michael, Nathan, would you like to share?
Yeah, first of all, good morning. Hope everybody is doing well. I echo everybody's comments. Thank you for putting this together, Roxanne and Charlie and Michael and everybody who worked on this. From a layman's point of view, I think this was very educational. I'm not sure, like Michael said, once we get to a certain vital signs, at what point can we do anything about it? So it's more, to me, it's very informative. And from a knowledge point of view, I'm just not sure, like Dr. Cortman said, you may not want to try to control the cyanobacteria issues more than the natural progression that they're going to take on its own. I may be saying that wrong, but anyway. So I'm coming to the group and going back to things that we can control a little more. And one of the things I'd like to get is a report. I know we asked last 2 weeks ago from Roxanne on the harvester, if anything's changed on that. And I'm talking from a populist group, not a science anymore, about the lake. What's going on with the harvester, but actually as important of that is that we as a group refocus on the restoration project, which we want to get done in 2022. And I think we need as a group to push the town to move this along. GZA, we've been in touch with GZA, and we're trying to get a cost estimate, and it's been not an easy thing. The only person that's allowed to talk to GZA at this point is Greg, and Roxanne being a select person. I'm not allowed, even though I'm on that committee, I'm not allowed to talk to GZA. And Greg, who's so busy, I think he needs help, Roxanne, from us, from you and I, of moving this project along.
Well, I can tell you that from my experience, I mean, you're dealing with a different GZA office with a dredging project. And so what I can do is I can reach out to Stephen Roy, who is in Connecticut, who we deal with, you know, with lake monitoring and lake management plan. And he used to be in that other office. And so maybe I can kind of prod him to put a little pressure on them to get back in a more timely way, because I'm noticing that too, that
Roxanne, I thought maybe the
information and it's just not coming in. So I will reach out to Stephen Roy and see if he can help make that move that along a little bit.
Yeah, because one of the things that we do have control about on the lake is the restoration issue, which is really a very important project to keep the lake as healthy for the next 30 years. Not going backwards, that it hasn't deteriorated, but we don't want it to deteriorate. We don't want it to get shallower and warmer and all the conditions that could possibly take place if the water flow is interrupted. So that being said, one of the things that I noticed is we had received a 319 grant in 2014 from the EPA or the DP, which was based on digging a channel to connect the water from the main part of the lake to the diversion pipe. $672,000 in order to reduce the lake by 4 feet in order to get over the silted area. And then, as we know, the NHESP changed their mind. But one of the things that I thought from the town point of view is really to bring up the fact that these changes from the DEP or the EPA has cost the town a lot of time and money for things that originally they had agreed to and then changed within their departments. Just to bring it up, because I think that if we keep kicking this thing down the road, it's going to lose its steam and finance. We have to remember this is a town project. This is not an SBA, even though I'm the SBA rep. This is not an SBA project. This is truly a town project that the SBA has gotten totally behind and has raised almost $1.5 million, I believe at this point, to give to the town for this project. The other thing that I would like to bring up is it was brought to my attention that maybe Mike Canales should be part of this meeting. I don't know how busy he is or whether it's not, but it was brought up as a suggestion. And what else do I have? That's pretty much it. We haven't had an SBA, we only have the SBA meetings once every month, probably once every month. We haven't had one now for a while, but from a use of the lake, let's really refocus to a point on this dredging project, on the restoration project, and giving a vote of confidence and pushing it along by the town, because I think we'll regret it if we don't get this thing done. I mean, that's my opinion. Anyway, one last thing, and getting back, Roxanne, is there any hope, any new hope with NHESP on the harvester, or can we be of help, the SBSC, to you?
Well, since our last meeting, it was good news. We finally heard back some more detailed information from Misty and Merrill. And basically, she was pointing out, she was responding to us saying, okay, we want to do, at least a recreational harvesting. And she responded and basically pointed out, all the areas that we will have to avoid, which of course goes without saying. So it's the test areas and the control area for the herbicide application. We know that. There was the hydro raking investigation, that hydro raking incident. Apparently there's an ongoing investigation. We have to avoid that area. And clearly there's always the snails. But so that was all good news. And at this point, I queried Steve Mack and said, okay, do you have all the requisite information? He said, yes. And he felt that we would be actually submitting by the beginning, I think, or the early March. He said within 2 weeks, and I think that was on the 11th, maybe. So by the end of this month, we're going to be prepared to have an NOI that we're ready to submit, and we will first, obviously, have this conference call with NHESP and DEP about that, so that we can really clarify what we can and cannot do, What are the limitations? We will put forth, as Richard Seltzer had requested, just asking about, okay, you know, full lake harvesting, et cetera. So that's all in good shape. So I'm anticipating that's going to happen the first week of March, possibly. Should I just go ahead and report on the other things I have to?
Yeah, Roxanne, it's your turn. So yeah, thank
All right,
you.
so we have received from GZA the proposal for the lake management plan. And I want to negotiate the cost a little bit. But that being said, basically they're recommending that we follow the Mass DEP format and framework that they've established and now is commonly used for this type of a plan. So they have started a preliminary version of the plan so that we can look at the format and flow. And so Mike and I are going to be talking about this, and I will be discussing this again with Steve Roy, and I'll touch base with Steve about trying to push along the dredging, you know, feedback for costing, because that's really critical. And just so you know, Michael, I have discussed the dredging at some length with Michael Canales. So, you know, it's not that he's not aware of this. So I am keeping him abreast as best I can. And at this point, we're just waiting for more information. And then we also have, the other thing I wanted to mention is the MVP grants, the action grants that Patrick initiated. The one thing that we have to keep in mind is there probably will be, because of climate change, there will be applications coming down the road where we can go out and apply for grants, but those grants are basically driven by the state. And so they determine, for these MVP action grants, they determine the criteria, the categories for which you can apply. So I just wanted to remind people of that. I think we should put together, you know, brainstorm our ideas about how we might be able to utilize some of this grant money for the benefit of the lake. But we are dependent on waiting for what the qualified criteria are. So it isn't just a free-for-all where we can just say, well, we want to do such and such, and therefore we're going to apply for a grant. We have to wait and see what those categories of grants are. And right now, you know, there are various ones out there, but we have to come into compliance with what the state is actually saying. Yeah, you can apply for this category or that category. So, you know, it may not be as open as we think, but I think we should all be considering that and, you know, maybe sharing our ideas, and then we can be checking, have Mike Canales check, you know, are these going to be legitimate? Could we apply for a grant? Does it qualify? And I guess that's it. And I thought that the report last week was great. And as Charlie and Mike were talking about, yeah, we now have determined a baseline. I mean, and the important thing about vital signs is always having the baseline of what's normal for that particular patient. And so now that we have a baseline for our particular lake, because all lakes are not created equal, we do know when something shifts. And what's important with vital signs is when they change. But first you have to have that baseline. And Michael, Nathan, I mean, one thing that I got out of Bob Cortman's statements during their report was that there may be actions we can take, and that by utilizing Bob Cortman as the limnologist and Chris Main as the lake manager, when we pass along any noticed changes that we're concerned about, they may actually have some steps that we could take, or, you know, make recommendations about whether we should or should not take some other course of action. So I did get the impression that it isn't that we would never do anything, but that we would rely on the limnologist to tell us, is this significant? Is there something we can do about it? That's all I've got, unless somebody has questions.
Yeah, I'd like to just make a comment. in the first place, personally, and I'm not an expert on this, I think that we're going to have to go forward with a dredging program of some kind. And I have a strong feeling that that's going to be important. What I'd like to say, though, is that I understand the frustration that the change in, that the idea that the DEP changed their opinion about what could be done after spending all that money and all that effort. I can understand the frustration of that, but I still think we need to keep a position of deference with respect to the DEP. The DEP did not make that decision whimsically or capriciously. The science of drawdowns had just recently changed. And I think this was spurred by some studies done at the University of Massachusetts. And the presence of this Marstonia lustrica snail, there's the bridal shiner. I'm not sure how much that contributed to their change in what's going on, but they did base their decisions on the changes in science that had occurred in the meantime. Now with that in mind, as much as I'm in favor of the dredging as being a probable need for the lake in the future, I think that the way we should go forward with that is through our lake manager and our lake management plan, rather than just pushing it independently on our own. I think that we'll gain more support from that, and we'll gain a more receptive point of view about that if we have someone who's on top of the science changing, so that we can be in a position to have, the lake manager will be like the doctor, and we'll give our points to the DEP in a way I think that will be most acceptable.
Thank you, Charlie. I agree with Charlie, and I loved how Dr. Cortman, when he did the water columns and the depths, and the months, and when he had the different bacteria and dredging, it'll help with the dredging so that we know when we pull out soil or silt, like when is a better time, and to get experts and do it properly so that you can never go back, you can't. So I agree with Charlie that using science and using is great. Now,
I have to say, I completely agree with Charlie also in that, number one, having a lake manager on board is going to help us with the DEP. And one thing that Bob Corbin had mentioned is there is some concern about disruption of that water column. And so we want to rely on their expertise in terms of proceeding with dredging. How do we avoid disruption of the water column? Do we have to be concerned about that? And, what would be the best approach when we move forward?
Let me just address this. The reason I brought that up was not to argue that we're not going in the direction that we should change directions, because we've been working with NHESP and we're getting close to an agreement. What I'm saying is that I'm concerned. I think they have to give us a little more leeway as to what we can and can't. Well, I don't know how to say this, but I think the changes are constant from them. So now I'm hoping, what I'm trying to do is give an education to us of what's happened in the past and the money that was spent, and the Concom was in favor of the diversion pipe, and the DEP was in favor of the diversion pipe, and then it all fell apart. And I'm not against the drawdown going to 2 feet. I welcome it. Personally, I welcome, even against many people in the SBA, but I welcome almost the water not being lowered at all. I think it's healthier, personally. All I'm saying is that as a group, we were going to do a vote on, how can I say it, on accepting this as a major project, and we didn't put it at, we put it on hold a few months ago. And I just want to return to it because I think the town needs to know that we are really behind this project. And my concern is we've been working on it for almost 10 years now. And there's a point where we have to make it work, or I don't see it going forward. I think a lot of the people will lose myself included, will lose that ability to fight for it or raise money for it or whatever it is that's needed. But I'm hoping that as a group, we can agree that this is an important project, and therefore, as advisors to the town, really push it to the town to say, with Mike Canales or whoever, to discuss the importance to the NHESP about this project. The other thing I want to say, and then I'll go, is one of the control areas, as I'm concerned, is where one of the geobags may be going. And that might be a conflict. Roxanne, we've discussed this in the past.
Which area are you talking about?
On the west part of the lake.
Oh, that's the test area.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I'm
not the control
concerned what that means for the restoration project if we can do it in 2022.
Well, I mean, right now, I don't think anybody here, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody here doesn't think that the dredging project is of a very high priority. And right now, what's really in the critical path of this has been moving forward, Michael. You know, we went out this, summer. We found the locations so that, geobags, and it's moving forward. And what's holding us up in the critical path right now is hearing back in terms of cost estimates, because, but the town is not holding this up. I think that,
The town is not holding it up. I agree
so
with
I
you.
think that, if whatever I can do to try to move this along, we will do. And I will, give Mike Canales a heads up about this particular predicament as well. But because the town can't do a whole lot in terms of bringing it to the voters when we don't have any costs. And so this is a big deal, but there has been progress. I mean, obviously, there's been a great deal of progress since this past summer in terms of just the design phase moving forward. So but I don't think anybody here doesn't recognize that this is a high priority item. We don't want to let this go to the point beyond the pale. And Mike and I have had that conversation. This is critical and it's time sensitive. We're going to have to get on this pretty quickly.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Roxanne.
Anyone else have anything to add for their committees or their concerns?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Charlie.
This would probably, you'd probably be the best one to answer this. I don't know. I've heard, and I don't know the facts about this, but I've heard that there's been a recent incident on the lake of the Conservation Commission giving specific directions and limitations to a house that was under construction. And then the owners or the property managers or whatever going forward and doing something that was outside of what was being permitted by the Conservation Commission. So what I'm asking really is this going to create another situation like that situation we're already dealing with, where there was some silt or something removed, and now that it was contrary to what was permitted, and now we can't do harvesting in near that area? Are we going to run into another kind of problem like that?
I think you're referring to the gentleman who put 9 boulders into the Stockbridge Bowl, and he was asked to take them out. They're still in the lake, and now that the lake is frozen, he can't. I don't know how that'll affect harvesting. They're not so far into the water, but they're still. It hasn't been resolved. It's sort of still open. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, Charlie.
I think it is. I'm just worried that that's going to create another situation where we're going to have a limitation on how much harvesting we can do, because we're going to have this area that's going to be under investigation.
Right.
Can I just say another thing concerning this harvester? Okay. That's pretty troubling when you say that they threw boulders in. I'll tell you why, from a mechanical, I've driven this thing and I've been working with the harvester for 15 years now, is the fear if these rocks are underwater, they can do major damage to the machine itself, just as an added
Well, of course.
argument for you to make
That's-
sure that he takes these out. Or where, I don't know, what part of the lake is it, Jamie? Do you know?
Yes, of course. It's on the town beach side. It's on 20 Mackinac
No.
Shores Road. It's a new gentleman to town, and he wasn't very honest. And yeah,
Yeah, just letting you know that it could be a problem if any of
I
the
think
machines-
I think a lot of people are aware of that. It's also that no one else has ever put boulders into the lake. Like that is. Anyway, anything else?
I have a question about the boulders because I haven't seen this, but are they right on the shoreline? Where did he put these things?
So he took about 6 railroad ties and he built up the land, and then they took a bulldozer and they put them into the water. So they're like half submerged. I don't know now with the water frozen. And he said, no, they were there, and they were never there.
Oh, gosh.
And they're all in a line as if it looks, and this is my, I probably shouldn't do this because we're being recorded, but it does seem as though with the land built up with the railroad ties and the line, that these boulders are in a perfect line. They weren't just dumped from a dump truck, that perhaps he was thinking of building out.
Or he's holding that retaining wall.
Yes. Mhm.
Jamie, it's Jim. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Who's the enforcement agency when you guys run into stuff like this? Is it the Conservation Commission? Is it the DEP?
I guess the Conservation Commission, from my understanding, can do a stop work order, but it was never legally or done. So I'm not exactly sure of who the next step is, if it's DEP or if there's another commission of who can help.
Yeah, because one of the things that, through our original committee that the Board of Health had put together for a couple of years, we had people at the table from the Conservation Commission, and, we heard repeatedly, that for example, order of conditions would be issued with a certain project, but, people didn't meet those order conditions, and, there was non-compliance issues here. And you got a board made up with volunteers or whoever, if you're elected or not. And it's just one of those things that it goes back to the model of like the Tri-Town district that we work for. We're the agents for the boards of health, and we do all the inspections, the enforcement. But the Board of Health, they're the overseers of the jurisdictional authority. And I know in many other towns that conservation commissions hire their own like conservation agent. Like Pittsfield has a full-time agent. And it's something that, we don't want to keep adding costs to the town, but that's something that the town should seriously weigh in the future, because conservation commissions, although you have a lot of authority under your jurisdictional hat, you can't be there all the time. You can't do the inspections all the time. You can't write the orders all the time. And it's something that, the town should seriously consider in the future. If you're going to try to wrap around, trying to gain compliance with these orders, you may want to have a mechanism to at least have a part-time inspector that can help the town ensure compliance all the time. Just a thought as you close the meeting.
No, that's a great idea, because it came up with something, because what is it? Sort of word of mouth, or, the verbal agreements are sort of not being kept by people. They come to the committee and they say, oh, we're going to do this, this, and that, and here's our plan. And then you go to the site and that isn't the plan. It has diverted from. And there was another project on Ice Glen Road that 19 years ago, they were supposed to fix some kind of ditch and drainage, and now they want to sell it, but they never fixed it. And so they've been out of compliance for 19 years, but no one checked on it. So yeah, conservation agent might be a worthwhile. And is that done through the select board, or is that done through
Good question. I don't know, because the Board of Health is a lot separate compared to conservation, but I would think that would probably go through the town, and that person would probably report to the Conservation Commission. I'm not really sure how Pittsfield works, but I just feel like, because we do a lot of work on the bowl with septics, and making sure that there's hay, but we don't oversee the hay bills, the silt runoffs. And I think that's an opportunity, as things settle out over time, to really consider, even if it's part-time with no benefits, just to see if it's or like a pilot, to see if that works. Even if you get complaints, like we get hundreds of complaints a year, whether they're valid or not, we investigate every one of them. And I just feel like if you're investing significantly into the community in the bowl, that, you may want to think about that long term. It may not be a short term solution, but like I hear these complaints, and, or if conditions aren't met, we can't do this and we can't do that, because you have a board that can only do so much, right? And it's something that you should really consider investing over a long period of time to ensure compliance with any condition that you may have. In a situation with these boulders, that could be investigated by the conservation agent and just follow through with that, rather than everyone trying to figure out the best way to handle that. Just a thought and idea.
Thank you, Jim.
And now you got railroad ties soaked in creosote next to the lake. And I mean, I always understood the Concom as a branch, like an arm of the DEP. So if you guys get into a situation where it sounds like you need some backing, the DEP gets a phone call and they come out and do an inspection, but they're very short staffed as well. I mean, just like any other place, I mean, trying to keep up with all the orders of conditions and inspections, it gets very overwhelming, I guess.
I appreciate Jim Willis's point of view, and also Mike's. The idea that the Board of Health has, I think, that the perspective that the Board of Health has is that having the Tri-Town Health Department's inspectors and agents available and to do this on a regular basis increases the dimension and the capabilities of the boards of health. And I think Sewer and Water has an analogous situation, with its employees that are, on the scene in the trenches, doing a lot of the stuff and reporting back a lot of times. I think the Conservation Commission deserves to have this. I think that it would insulate them from a lot of the stuff that they're not really prepared to handle on a regular basis, because they're, it's a different kind of function in some ways. You need tough people. Now, Jim Willis is like a Doberman Pinscher. And when we have a Board of Health meeting and he's there, I just keep him on a leash, and then we let him go if we need to. But I'm telling you that he made a really important point. If we're going to be moving forward and making significant investments in operations and planning and monitoring, like we've already done, to keep the Stockbridge Bowl at the high level of quality that it is right now, we should back that up. And the Conservation Commission is one of those groups that we're going to be relying on to help back us up. So I agree with Jim's suggestion. I think it'd be a very good idea to have a conservation agent.
Right. I think it's a really important thing that probably should be taken up by the select board, and we can discuss and maybe get a little more background in terms of how other people are utilizing conservation agents, and how does that, segue with the DEP and their authority.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So thank you. Because it helps all of our departments and committees. Any other comments, questions, concerns at this time? Okay, I'll take that as no. Does someone want to make a motion to adjourn? And the next meeting would be Friday, March 5th at 8 a.m., if that works.
So moved. I make that motion that we adjourn and that we reconvene on March the 5th, as you said, at 8 a.m.
Okay.
I will be in Northern Maine snowmobiling for the first week of March. So
There's no snow in Maine, Mike. I'm telling
Well,
you.
there is where we're going.
You need to go to Texas.
Yeah, how about it? So just so you know, I won't be able to attend that meeting, but I'll be
Right.
thinking about you,
Dawn
I
can
promise.
All right.
I would just like to make a observation. Michael, don't think of us. Enjoy yourself.
All right. So I will see you all March 5th except Mike B. Then have a great 2 weeks.
Thank you.
All right.